The document was marked Confidential, Amazon HQ2 NYC, in red letters across every page. It had been locked in a secure server at the New York Economic Development Corporation for 18 months, accessible only to 3 people: the governor, the deputy mayor, and Jeff Bezos' personal attorney. But at 2:47 a.m. on a freezing February morning, that document was sitting on Mayor Zohran Mamdani's desk in Queens. Within 8 minutes of reading it at a city council hearing, it would destroy a $5 billion deal that Amazon had spent 3 years building. What was in those 127 pages that made Jeff Bezos' top lobbyists walk out of a hearing room in the middle of questioning? But this story begins long before that document on November 12th, 2023, at Daniel, one of Manhattan's most expensive restaurants. The table was in the private corner section, the kind of place where politicians and CEOs cut deals that shaped the future of New York over $400 bottles of wine. Michael Faulkner, Amazon's vice president of public policy, was at Daniel that evening. With him sat James Morrison, president of the New York Economic Development Corporation, and 2 senior aides to the governor. Faulkner was the kind of man who'd closed deals with 47 different governments, secured billions in tax incentives, and never lost a negotiation. Yale law graduate, wearing a Patek Philippe watch and a suit that cost more than most New Yorkers make in a year. "Gentlemen," Faulkner said, raising his wine glass, "Amazon HQ2 coming to New York is the greatest economic opportunity in this city's history. 40,000 jobs, $5 billion in investment. This will be the center of the tech revolution." Morrison nodded, his eyes gleaming with excitement. The governor is thrilled. This deal will be his legacy. But there was something Faulkner wasn't saying, details that nobody at that table knew. How that 40,000 jobs number was really calculated. How much of that $5 billion investment was actually coming from taxpayer money? And most importantly, what Amazon really wanted from this deal. Faulkner pulled out a folder. "Now let's talk about the incentive package. Amazon needs certain accommodations to make this project viable." Accommodations, the polite word in politics for taxpayers footing a multi-billion-dollar bill. For the next 3 hours, one of the biggest corporate deals in New York history was crafted at that table. Tax credits, property tax exemptions, infrastructure investments, special transit subsidies. Each one worth millions, sometimes billions of dollars. But the real genius of the deal was in its complexity. Hundreds of pages of legalese, side agreements, confidentiality clauses, designed so that no one, reporters, politicians, citizens, could understand what was really happening. Walking out of Daniel that night, Faulkner was a confident man. This deal would be like all the others. A press conference, shiny statistics, happy politicians. Amazon would get what it wanted, and by the time New York looked back to see what they'd actually paid, it would be too late. But Michael Faulkner hadn't accounted for Sarah Chen. Sarah Chen was a senior analyst at the New York Economic Development Corporation who'd been working there for 12 years. MIT economics graduate, fluent in 3 languages, the kind of professional who could see the truth behind the numbers. And she'd been working on the Amazon HQ2 project for 6 months. Initially, Chen was excited. A company like Amazon coming to New York was a massive opportunity for the economy. Job creation, tech investments, new possibilities. Chen had prepared presentations, crunched numbers, watched her bosses celebrate what they called the economic opportunity of a generation. But on November 12th, 2023, at 11:47 p.m., sitting alone in her office, she discovered something in the contract that made her blood run cold. Chen was reviewing the digital copy of the document, checking final details. On page 73, in a dense section of text filled with footnotes, she saw a small paragraph buried in a place where it wasn't expected to be found. Job creation targets, 8,000 full-time positions in year 1, with expansion goal to 40,000 over subsequent 10 years, subject to market conditions and corporate strategic priorities. Chen's heart raced. The word goal, the word subject to. This wasn't a commitment. This was a hope. She went deeper. On page 89, she found the investment numbers. What they called a $5 billion investment was actually a very different story. Amazon's own money, $1.3 billion. New York State tax incentives, $2.1 billion. NYC infrastructure investments, $890 million. Federal grants and other sources, $710 million. Chen leaned back, staring at the screen. What they were calling a $5 billion investment was 74% taxpayer money. Amazon was only putting in 26%. But the worst part was yet to come. On page 104, she found the clawback provisions. If Amazon didn't create the jobs they'd committed to, which legally it turned out they weren't required to, New York could only recover 12% of the money. Chen felt her hands trembling. This wasn't just a bad deal. This was systematic deception. The next 48 hours were the hardest decision of Chen's life. If she reported this, her career was over. If she didn't, she'd silently witness New York lose $3.7 billion. On the morning of November 14th, Chen created an anonymous email account and sent a message to Mayor Zohran Mamdani's office. The subject line was simple: Amazon HQ2, you need to know the truth. When Mamdani's chief of staff, Elena Rodriguez, received that email, she initially thought it was spam. But when she opened the attachments, page after page of documents, internal memos, financial projections, she knew this was real. Mayor, Rodriguez said, rushing into his office, I found something about the Amazon deal, and it's career-ending material. The next 3 weeks, Mamdani's team worked in secret. Every page was verified, every number cross-checked. Several covert meetings were arranged with Chen through encrypted communication channels. The whistleblower provided more documents, more evidence. But Mamdani knew something. This wasn't just about numbers. This was about New York's future, how corporate power manipulates democracy, and a system where ordinary people fight to have their voices heard. December 5th, 2025, City Council Hearing Day. Subject: Economic Impact Assessment of Amazon HQ2. This was the formal approval session Amazon had requested. It was supposed to be routine. A few friendly questions, a vote, done. Michael Faulkner arrived at City Hall that morning with confidence. 5 lawyers, 3 media consultants, and a crisis manager. Briefings had been conducted, talking points prepared. Everything was under control. But when he entered the room, something felt wrong. Reporters had arrived much earlier than usual. Camera crews had positioned themselves in every corner. There'd been no leaks from Mamdani's office, but there was electricity in the air. The hearing began at 10:30 a.m. The first 45 minutes were standard New York political theater. Republican council members praised Amazon's job creation potential. Faulkner delivered his prepared responses: 40,000 jobs, $5 billion investment, tech innovation. Democratic members asked more critical questions: community impacts, displacement, gentrification, but still predictable. Faulkner navigated each one easily. Then at 11:47 a.m., Mamdani's turn arrived. Mr. Faulkner, Mamdani began, his voice carrying that dangerous calm, I want to start with a simple question. Faulkner smiled politely. Of course, Mayor. How many jobs is Amazon committing to bring to New York with this project? 40,000 full-time, high-paying tech jobs, Faulkner answered confidently. He'd repeated this number hundreds of times. Interesting, Mamdani opened a folder. Because I have a copy of Amazon's contract with New York State. The temperature in the room dropped instantly. Faulkner's smile froze. That contract was confidential. How? Let me read from page 73, Mamdani continued. Job creation targets: 8,000 full-time positions in year 1, with expansion goal to 40,000 over subsequent 10 years, subject to market conditions and corporate strategic priorities. Silence. Mr. Faulkner, this isn't a commitment. This is a goal. Can you explain the difference between these two? Faulkner's face flushed. Mayor, economic projections are inherently yes or no question, Mr. Faulkner. Is Amazon legally required to create 40,000 jobs? Projections depend on market conditions. Is that a no? Faulkner hesitated. Economic agreements require flexibility. That's a no. Mamdani turned another page. Now let's look at the investment numbers. Amazon says it's investing $5 billion in this project. Correct? Yes, total investment. I'm going to ask what portion of that total investment is Amazon's own money. Do you know that number? Faulkner's face went pale. That number wasn't supposed to be discussed publicly. Mr. Faulkner, financing structures are complex. $1.3 billion. Mamdani interrupted. Amazon is putting in only $1.3 billion of this $5 billion investment. Where's the remaining $3.7 billion coming from? Silence spread. Let me tell you, Mamdani continued, turning each page one by one. New York State tax incentives, $2.1 billion. NYC infrastructure investments, $890 million. Federal grants, $710 million. So, Mr. Faulkner, when Amazon calls this a $5 billion investment, 74% of it is actually taxpayer money. The room erupted in chaos. Reporters were typing frantically. Council members stared at each other in shock. But Mamdani wasn't finished. And here comes the best part, Mamdani said, his voice carrying that sweet anger tone. Page 104, clawback provisions. Mr. Faulkner, if Amazon doesn't create the jobs they've targeted, how much of that $3.7 billion can New York recover? Faulkner tried to open his mouth, but no words came out. Let me answer. 12%. $444 million. Even if Amazon creates zero jobs, New York loses $3.2 billion forever. Everyone in the room was shocked. Even Republican members couldn't believe it. Mr. Faulkner, Mamdani's voice now filled the entire room. Amazon is asking New York taxpayers for $3.7 billion to make Jeff Bezos the world's richest man. And in return, they're offering a goal that's not legally binding. This isn't a deal. This is a heist. Faulkner stood up. Mayor, this characterization... Sit down, Mr. Faulkner. I'm not finished yet. Faulkner slowly sat back down, watching his lawyers frantically scribble notes in panic. Mamdani pulled out the final document. I want to read you an email from Amazon's internal communications, dated October 2023, from your chief economic advisor, Mark Reynolds, to you. Quote, Michael, the NYC deal is way better than the others. Incentive ratio is 74%, highest of our careers, and job creation requirements coded as goals, so zero legal obligation. This is free money. Faulkner's phone rang, a name everyone could see on the screen. Andy Jassy, Amazon CEO. Seattle had already mobilized. Mr. Faulkner, Mamdani said triumphantly, feel free to answer. I'm sure your bosses would love to hear this conversation. Faulkner chose to decline the call. Mr. Faulkner, Mamdani's voice now filled the room, it's time to tell the people of New York the truth. How long has Amazon been planning to systematically deceive the city? Faulkner looked around desperately. His lawyers couldn't help. Media consultants were silent. Mayor, he finally whispered, I think I need to speak with a lawyer. It was as good as a confession. Then this hearing is adjourned, Mamdani said, and this council will be voting to reject the Amazon HQ2 deal. 8 minutes and 19 seconds. That's how long it took. A mayor from Queens destroying the world's largest company's $5 billion deal. Within 2 hours, Amazon stock dropped 3%. Within 6 hours, Jeff Bezos called the White House. Within 24 hours, Amazon announced HQ2 would not be coming to New York. Sarah Chen, she was hailed as a hero, but she also became a target. Death threats started arriving. She was placed under protection. Mamdani? He was preparing for the next battle, because Amazon was just one name. There were dozens more companies trying to exploit New York, and now they all knew. Zohran Mamdani came to expose the truth, not to negotiate.